Hello, everybody, and welcome to everyone to another Indigenous Screen Office panel session. This session we'll be discussing the justice system in Canada and how Indigenous people and BIPOC people are situated within it. We based this session on Tasha Hubbard's fantastic film, nîpawistamâsowin, We Will Stand Up, which has just aired on September 13th on APTN. It's available now on the NFB website, on CBC Gem, and on APTN's Lumi service. So if you haven't seen the film, you may want to pause this discussion, go watch the movie, get yourself caught up on the story of Colten Boushie, and then come back and start again. So it's available for everyone to see. You can also find it, if you're not in Canada, on Amazon Prime for all of our international viewers. And we are joined by a really fantastic panel of very smart people. And I'm actually just gonna, I won't be able to do them justice in my own introduction. So I am gonna ask them to do themselves justice and just introduce themselves a little bit. And Tasha, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So hello, my name is Tasha Hubbard. I'm an associate professor in the Faculty of Native Studies and also a documentary filmmaker. I'm Cree from Treaty 4 area, from Papixis First Nation, and I have ties to the Sunchild First Nation in Treaty 6. And, you know, I'm just, as always, I feel really honored to have been trusted to tell this immensely important story of one of the biggest tragedies that's happened in this country in a while, and an event and a loss that's continued to be felt. And yeah, I'm grateful to the Indigenous Screen Office and you, Jesse, for making space for us today.
Debbie, would you mind introducing yourself?
I'm Debbie Baptiste. A Cree woman from Red Pheasant, Saskatchewan. My son was Colten Boushie. He was murdered here in Saskatchewan. Injustice was done here in Saskatchewan, that we never got justice for my son, Colten. And to do this documentary was to put word out there, the injustice that happened here in Saskatchewan, that the world would know that they did not sweep us under the carpet like they thought they were going to do. And then I had Tasha, Eleanore, Jade, my brother Alvin, and many people around Turtle Island that prayed for us, stood with us, cried with us, and continue on fighting for this justice that we deserve, that anybody that of dark skin color deserves, that we no longer let this happen to anybody, and continue standing up for ourselves, speaking for others. Yeah, so that's me, Debbie.
Thank you, Debbie. Jade?
Wente, hello. My name is Jade Tootoosis. I am a nîpawistamâsowin from the Red Pheasant Cree Nation in Saskatchewan. I'm also a member of the Rocky Boy Chippewa Cree Nation in Montana. And I am the cousin and sister to the late Colten Boushie. I've been working alongside, my auntie Debbie, and Tasha, Eleanore, Chris Murphy, so many others, in terms of going through the process with the colonial system and advocating for justice, and doing my best to speak truth and to support other families and raise awareness around the colonial and systemic racism that we continue to face, in hopes that it makes a difference for many generations to come, but to make way and some support for other families that experience this loss and have to endure this system as well. So I'm extremely honored to be here today with a group of powerful women and with you, Jessie, as well. So just continue to do the work and to continue to speak the truth. So thank you for having us here.
Thank you, Jade. Eleanor?
Good day. My name is Eleanore Sunchild. I'm an Indigenous Cree lawyer. I'm from Saskatchewan, Thunderchild First Nation to be specific. I base my law practice in the Battlefords, where the trial of Gerald Stanley took place and where he was acquitted of the killing of Colten Boushie. Since that time, I've joined this group of powerful vocal women in speaking about the injustice that occurred here in Saskatchewan. I'm honored to have been asked to sit on this panel today. It's been a difficult journey for the family. I've done my best as an advocate to sit by them and help them voice their concerns about the mistreatment that they suffered in Saskatchewan, specifically here in the Battlefords. Their strength is great and their vision is great. They have a love for their people beyond words and a love for their son and their brother, their nephew, that carries them on in this fight for other families so that this doesn't happen again. Situations like this should not happen in our country, should not happen in our province. I'm glad that Tasha made this movie, and I'm glad that people are watching it all over Turtle Island so that they see the story and the truth about Colten Boushie, the truth about what happened in this trial and the failure of the Canadian justice system in this case. So I look forward to talking today more about that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eleanor. And Sandy?
Hi, my name is Sandy. I am an activist with Black Lives Matter and a writer and also a student currently studying at the UCLA School of Law. And I just want to say that I'm very honored, Jessie, that you invited me to be a part of this conversation with these amazing women who've done so much through so much hardship to speak truth to power in one of the most heinous publicized racist situations that we have seen in Canada, that just really blows open the type of ugliness that underpins the existence of Canada altogether. It was really emotional for watching the film and relating that to my own experiences with my community. And I'm just really pleased that we can have a discussion all together about this. So thank you for inviting me here.
Thank you, Sandy, for joining us. I think it's important as our communities, the Black community and First Nations, Métis, and Inuit come together around these particular topics, which are of mutual and beneficial interest for all of our communities, that we share our insights and share ourselves. And can I just say, I'm always thrilled to be on a panel with such incredible women. I wish every panel was like this. So I thank you all again for joining me. It strikes me that, it's been 4 years since Colten was murdered. It's been, I guess, 1 year, Tasha, since the movie came out or debuted at Hot Docs. And it seems so much has happened, even just in the 1 year, let alone the 4 years. So I guess I'm going to put this to everyone so everyone can get a chance to answer. But I guess I would love to know how far have we come, or where have we ended up? Where were we then, and sort of where are we now, 4 years after Colten's murder? I guess I'd be interested in all of your assessments.
As someone who has studied and taught, you know, our history from an Indigenous perspective, you know, that was what struck me, you know, probably my third or fourth thought after being, you know, feeling so much sympathy for the family, and when I heard what had happened, was that this is a continuation of injustice, of a you know, a country and a system that started with injustice in terms of the way it you know, engaged with Indigenous people. And as a result, on some days I see that there hasn't been a lot of progress, you know, from that time, even though, you know, there's been so much effort. On the other hand, I think that what the family chose to do, which is take, you know, at cost, at an incredible cost, to not stay silent, to find strength and support to speak out when we live at a time where that's so discouraged, and so, you know, and by all sorts of ways, whether it's officially politically or whether it's, you know, the ugliness that shows up on social media, you know, to for them to have set that aside and continue to speak out, I think has had an incredible impact across the country in terms of, you know, this is the time that we can't be silent anymore. And we have endured, and we have had our activists and our supporters and our people speaking out, you know, but I could see it shift. I could see it in the rallies that were held across the country, you know, when Gerald Stanley was acquitted, that, you know, I could see that collective grief and rage throughout. And I think that, you know, there's been a shift, and we're going to see the impact of that. We're going to see the impact of, and you know, we see that in the work that's being done, and you know, in the last few months, by, you know, by the Black community, by the BIPOC community, by just you know, there's been a shift where we're not going to accept this anymore. And of course, at our heart, we never really truly accepted it. It was just that, you know, we're dealing with so many other things that sometimes it's overwhelming. But anyway, I can see that shift. So on the good days, I go, okay, there changes are happening. Can there be more done? Of course, and I'd like to talk more about that going forward.
For Debbie and Jade, how has the journey been for the family? Like, how do you see the situation from that incredible tragedy to now?
Well, for me, it tore up my family. We were never the same again. To this day, we're still going through a lot of hardship. My son, my daughter, you know, it's just a heartache they're never going to get over. And it's a long journey. We're still trying to heal. We go to ceremonies, do everything that's culture, go to powwows to heal, try to. So within those 4 years, that's what we did. We did a lot of ceremonies, a lot of praying, and just trying to get our family back together. So it's hard. And it's still a long journey. It's not over. So with the hardships that we continually struggle through, I just pray and hope it doesn't continue happening to families, but it is. And I could see it in the States, what's going on there, and it's hard to watch the injustice that they also go through. And then people can't comprehend why we're so angry is because of that. We just want justice in that courtroom, just like everybody else. The Munya sucks. We want fair trial. We don't want them to always be the underdog. That needs to stop. You know, it's just, everything needs to change now. And it's just, yeah, it's been a long journey and it continues. And I feel for the other families that are going through what we just came out of. Yeah, it's sad. So I hope for change, pray for change. That's all I got to say on that.
Yeah, as you mentioned, it's been 4 years, and you know, my auntie spoke very strongly to just how difficult it's been. It might have been 4 years, but it still feels like it just happened. All of it just happened. And even, you know, preparing for this discussion today and reflecting on 4 years, it all comes back in some big waves at times. It can be really overwhelming, and you know, just trying to deal with the grief and the anger and the sadness, and it's always there. It's always there. And when you hear of another family who's lost a loved one to colonial violence, to racism, to know that they're going to then face a system that wasn't kind to us, you know, it's hard. It's hard to hear those stories, and I instantly, you know, my heart goes out to them, and at times they reach out to us or we reach out to them. I remember one family member saying, you know, I thought of you guys instantly when my loved one passed, and I thought, oh my God, you know, what happened to them is going to happen to us. And it's a scary thought to an Indigenous person in Canada, you know, to think what happened to us could happen to them, because that is the reality. That's exactly, you know, what happens. And we do our best to support one another, and we can only share our experience as to what we tried and the challenges we faced, the many barriers we faced, and just the people who joined us in our advocacy and fight, such as Eleanore and Tasha and just so many others, and came forward with different ideas on what to do. We can only speak to our experience in hopes that it will give inspiration and strength to others, but also to non-Indigenous people or people who work in the systems, that the moment this happens, they do reflect, okay, you know, what happened in Saskatchewan during the Stanley trial, what happened to Colten Boushie and to his family, you know, how can we do this differently? It should hopefully raise awareness to them to do different in their practices and how they handle the situation, how they speak to families, how do they support families, how they handle the evidence. Like, there's so many factors to the process itself, but even to the individuals who are not in the institutions or the systems, to reflect on ways they can contribute and help and to support that family, but to be the changes that we need. And I am grateful to Tasha for making this film, because she took a big weight off of our shoulders, that we don't have to tell our story in great detail every single time to get through to people. She brought her gift of storytelling to bring to light and to record what we went through, so we don't have to do that every single time, you know. And I hope that people learn from this, you know, learn from our story. It's so complex. There's so many layers. There's so many steps that need to be addressed. But to the families out there who don't get their stories told, you know, we need to make space and way for them to also reflect on what happened to them and their loved ones, and to remember them and to honor them. This happens all too often, and we need to support one another. We need to support one another, and it needs to stop. Just as my auntie said, enough is enough. Mm-hmm. We never accepted it, and we will not accept it continuing forward. So it's been a journey, and we'll just continue. We'll continue to be here. We'll continue to speak out. We will not be silent, and it takes all of us to be able to do that. So once again, sitting here with an amazing and strong group of people, it's easier to sit here and speak to this, just sitting amongst you. And I encourage anyone that is speaking out, surround yourself with a strong support network. Surround yourself with a safe support, because there's a lot of ugly out there doing this work.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Sandy, I'm interested in that, this is not obviously an isolated incident. We've seen many more since. I think all of us are fearing that there will be many more to come. But we've also seen an enormous movement, particularly in this year, arise. And it feels like all of our communities are fed up at this point, that we've reached the point where we just can't endure this any longer. So I'd be interested in where you think we are at this point, and I guess how far we've come in our unified and our struggle of solidarity.
Yeah, thank you for that question. 2016 was also a really intense period of time of activism in the Black community around Andrew Logu and Abdirahman Abdi, who were both killed by police, all at the same time that this was happening to your family. And at the time, one of the things that I remember feeling, and not just at that time, but since 2014, since we started doing this sort of activism, was something that I felt was so well depicted in the documentary, Tasha. The moment when you folks were at the UN and waiting to speak, and it felt like you maybe weren't going to be able to speak. That's what I feel like a lot of the activism around this feels like. It's like there is this obvious thing that I just need to say to the world, that our community needs to express to the world. And everyone, it just feels like the whole setup is created to say, like, wait your turn. There's all of these more important things that need to be dealt with, and wait your turn, wait your turn. And it's absolutely enraging to think, like, isn't this the most urgent thing, human life? Is this not the most urgent thing that we could be talking about? And I've felt that way forever. I feel like when I'm not able to speak to an issue, it really outlines the power dynamic. And of course, we're always raising our voice to power, but who has the ability to listen is really controlled by other people in power. Other people in power have to say, this is worth listening to, in order to have the largest audience exposed to the injustice that our communities are going through. And so where I do think we've come here in 2020 is a place where we have kind of ripped through that wall that has really stopped mass media and our mass culture from really having a true discussion about what the police, what the law, what white supremacy does to our communities. And I think that work that Black and Indigenous communities are engaged in constantly has really shifted where our society is right now, what they think about some of these issues. Now, I don't know that it's shifted policymakers and people in power. I don't think it has. But I do think that in our broader culture, like the culture, the mass culture, has seen some sort of shift this summer, and it's due to the type of really hard work that we've been engaged in, even when no one's listening.
Thank you. Eleanor, Sandy mentioned the law, so I turn to the lawyer among us. are we from a legal standpoint? Has anything changed in the past 4 years that will be beneficial for our communities within the law?
There has been one big change as a result of the Gerald Stanley trial, and that is the elimination of preemptory challenges. So in the Gerald Stanley trial, all of the Indigenous looking jurors, and you see on the movie that there was an Indigenous juror speaking about his experience during the trial, during the jury selection, where he was eliminated by the use of preemptory challenges. After the Gerald Stanley trial and meeting with the government, the federal government, preemptory challenges were eliminated in the criminal code. There has been a lot of opposition from trial lawyers across the country to this elimination of preemptory challenges. However, this is going all the way to the Supreme Court currently regarding preemptory challenges, and Debbie will be making representations through her lawyer, myself and Chris, about preemptory challenges and how the elimination should continue. Because it's been our position all along that had there had been 1 or 2 or 3 Indigenous jurors on that jury, as there probably should have been given the population in the Battlefords, the demographics of the Battlefords, there may have been very well a different verdict, or it would have at least seemed to have been an unbiased jury. The jury was made up of all non-Indigenous people because of the use of preemptory challenges. That is the jury that Gerald Stanley was tried and acquitted by. And it's our position that there should have been a representative jury. We hope that the elimination of preemptory challenges continues so that there can be fair and representative juries across this country. We hope that no other families have to face all non-Indigenous jury each and every day that they go to the trial of their loved one. And so that's one change. However, the wheels of justice, the justice system itself is a colonial institution. It has always been used to, right from the time of residential school, the justice system has been used against Indigenous people. For example, it was used to remove the children from their families and put them into residential schools. And the laws have not been fair to Indigenous people since this country was created. The justice system needs a major overhaul to deal with all of the issues in this country, to deal with their own systemic racism, to deal with how they conduct their affairs with Indigenous people. And Indigenous people are overrepresented in the Canadian justice system as well. So for any major changes in the justice system, we're not going to see those for a long time, I don't think. So, and it's been a lot of people's position that we need to look towards our own systems of justice, our own traditional Indigenous legal systems, so that we are treated fairly. There's a lot of systemic racism within the justice system. And generally there's a lot of racism in Saskatchewan. That needs to be addressed. There's stereotypes and biases that people have grown up with, that live with, that they don't understand that they even hold those points of view towards Indigenous people. And unfortunately, we see that translated into the court system. There needs to be much education. We're talking that this is a time of reconciliation. It's a time of learning the true history of Canada and colonization, and there needs to be a lot of work done in that area. As I said, Saskatchewan is a very racist province. There is a lot of stereotypes that people hold that they don't know. And when you try to educate them more, try to explain the colonial history of this province, there's a lot of backlash because people don't want a lot of times to hear the truth. The truth is hard. This movie is very difficult to watch for many people. It's very difficult to watch for people who have generational, intergenerational stereotypes, who have only had one view of the world, who have had limited contact with Indigenous people, who hold stereotypical views towards Indigenous people. It's very hard for them to learn exactly what happened in this case. And this is just one example of how the justice system has mistreated Indigenous people. There are hundreds and thousands of more instances like this that we have not heard of. And that's because it's the status quo. It's the status quo. It's how it's been. It's going to take a lot of concerned citizens and advocates to start and continue speaking about the injustices that they face, to keep raising awareness, to keep talking about Colten Boushie, for example, to talk about other instances of injustice within our country, within our province, to create that change. And until the leaders, the people who create the laws understand that this country was created on colonization, this country, then the laws were created not to benefit Indigenous people, then we're not going to see real change until we get to that point. So to answer your question, there has been some change, but not the change that is needed. And that's going to take a while and a lot of effort to change the laws and the systems that have been historically used against Indigenous people.
Thank you. I think you touched on a really many valuable points there, but you touched on one that actually Jade and Sandy were discussing in our little downtime there, which was that these systems aren't failing us. They're actually working as they were constructed. These are the outcomes that are desired by the system, and so they're achieving that. And I would place both the justice system, the court system, and the police as both being achieving exactly what they were designed to do in terms of enacting violence in our communities and then not at all serving us when we come for justice from those. We're in the midst of this movement around defunding the police. And I guess I'm just wondering, and I'll start with you, Eleanor, as the lawyer. You talked about a return to more traditional systems of justice. Can the Canadian justice system actually be reformed since it was built and is operating as intended? Are we actually able to reform it so that it will serve us better, or is the answer really in building our own ways to find justice within our own communities and asserting for First Nations people our sovereignty and self-determination to do that?
Can we indigenize the justice system enough so that it serves Indigenous people effectively? I would say no. We've had our own systems of governance, of justice since time immemorial. And those teachings are still there. those systems are still there. They just have to be revitalized. That would be how we would achieve what we want for our people, is to live safely and protected and understood by a system that is ours. The justice system, it's the Canadian justice system, will never understand Indigenous people. And as a lawyer who's been practicing law for over 20 years, I say that realistically speaking, I have seen too many injustices to put my faith into the Canadian justice system to make real and positive change towards Indigenous people. No, it won't. And yes, we need to look towards our own systems and look to revitalizing them and placing them within our communities so that we are safe and understood.
And Sandy, would you see the same thing in terms of the police? That is, I guess I'm asking, is defunding even enough? Like, is abolition really the only way to ensure safety from the police in our communities?
Yes, absolutely. Like I don't see those two things as different. I just think that defund is a word that people are less afraid of, and it opens the conversation. Do you know what I mean? But complete defunding is an abolition of police, and I truly believe that. I think that policing is an irredeemable institution. It is an institution that was created to protect the property of rich white men from Europe. And that property included people, and that property included land. And to do such protection, that institution was engaged in, and is engaged in, restraining, constraining, killing people. That's the origin of the institution. Why would we want to save that institution? I mean, we can do all of the lying to ourselves in society that we want, but it has not transformed. This is not an institution that is keeping people safe. This is not an institution that is addressing some of our most necessary security and safety needs. If we were concerned about those things, we would see massive shifts in the way that we deal with things like gender-based violence, which is something that truly affects our communities very differently than non-Black and non-Indigenous communities. Those things have been completely ignored because that institution is not concerned with safety and security in that way. We could build institutions to address these things, but instead we're pumping so much money into policing, which really, I mean, I don't know how anybody looks at what they do and thinks, oh yeah, this is something that we can change. We can just shift it. People have been trying that for decades. They don't want to change. They will not change. The whole structure of the way that they're created, their entire history, it's just not possible. There is nothing that they do well. I challenge anybody to find me something. There's nothing that they do well. And I do not think that they should exist. And the way that the police operate in tandem with the legal system creates this insurmountable challenge to our communities. So if we buy into those systems, they make us go through all of these things, trudge through all of this stuff and tell us just hang in there, just believe in it. But if the proof is in the experience of your family, the proof is in the experience of so many people in my community, and like even just the sheer numbers of cases that turn out just like Colten's did.
Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to jump in here a little bit that, we've been following, and I'll say we attempted to interview the commanding officer who in charge of the province of Saskatchewan. And, I knew as a filmmaker, he can't necessarily speak directly to the case. I mean, the trial hadn't happened yet. All of, there's a lot of things were ongoing. And then, there's an official complaint that's been launched through the family and the Public Complaints Commission. But I just simply asked, can we talk about the history of the RCMP's relationship with Indigenous people in this area? And the answer came back, well, do you want to talk to our RCMP historian? And I'm like, no, I don't. I want to talk to the person who's in charge, the person who is the leadership of this. And, if you're not comfortable talking about that, then how are you able to do this work now, right? And so that was our flag. And then they tried to get us as a film to agree to let them have editorial control over how we talked about the RCMP in the film. And that's very worrying. That's really worrying. And we actually reached out to other filmmakers. We're like, have you ever been given this agreement? And we haven't been able to find anybody because they wanted to control that narrative. And, and then if we did sign, we couldn't even talk that we'd signed. They had a non-disclosure element to the agreement, and then to go forward and hear, to hear the head of the RCMP deny systemic racism. The person who's now in charge in Alberta, who is the same person in charge in Saskatchewan, also denied the existence of systemic racism this spring, when the issue is in the forefront for so many of us, and then the news came out a couple weeks ago that their group, the RCMP's group, it continues, to have, violent and virulent racism. And we're supposed to believe that they are there to protect us. And that, there are a lot of really powerful myths in Canada, and that is one of them, that police are there to protect. And again, looking, what is the origin? Well, it wasn't to look out for us, it wasn't to care for us and to see us as fully human and fully worthy of protection. That just doesn't happen. That's not, that's, and I, as a storyteller, you never are able to tell all the stories you want to, and you're never able to tell all the stories that people come to you with, and it's heartbreaking. There are so many other stories that haven't been told of the horrible treatment from police, from corrections officers, from all of the different facets of this legal system. That's just continuing and ongoing. And, the other thing I just wanted to mention is, Sandy, you talked to, and you asked the question, sort of, we're saying what we're needing to say. This family is saying what they're saying, and who is listening? And, just before the pandemic, Debbie and Jade and myself and a few others from the film traveled to Ottawa. And, when the family went to Ottawa, which you see in the film, there were a lot of commitments made. Oh, we'll have you come out again. We'll continue to talk. We'll continue to meet. And that didn't happen. And so we went back. Film is out, and we were there was an invitation to screen the film for Parliament, for the MPs and senators. And we were like, well, we're going to be there. Let's call them on that. And so there were more meetings, and that was the message there is, don't make us the problem. Don't make this family the problem. Don't make Indigenous people the problem. Don't make Black people the problem. We are not the problem. The problem is how we are treated by the system that you represent. That was our message. And so what are you going to do about it? And there's a lot of words, and we're still waiting for that action, and March came and all, things shifted, but there are still these things that are ongoing. The issues haven't gone away, and the need for action from those people in positions of power, that's what we're waiting for. And we're tired of waiting. You know, it's people are being affected, and that needs to change.
Tasha, you mentioned narrative and myth making, and it strikes me that storytelling swirls all around these issues in terms of the myths that we're told about the police and the justice system in Canada itself, but also that part of maybe the movement in people's attitudes or thinking is also the result of storytelling. The media, and for sure we can complain about the media, and maybe we can do that later in this panel, but it also strikes me that movies like this make a difference because they raise awareness for people. And as grotesque as it is, it seems for some segments having to view the deaths of people at the hands of the police is the only way that they will actually be convinced that this is a thing that actually occurs. And so it strikes me that media storytelling has really been key to how we've arrived at this moment. And I guess I'd ask Debbie and Jade around the decisions to engage with a film, to tell the story in this way, and then to continue this engagement like you have both been doing with the film and in your advocacy. How was that decision to do this, and how do you think that has affected, I guess, both your family but also the issues at play?
Well, when Colten, when they gave me the information that my son was murdered and how we were treated by the RCMP, and how they didn't let me know that he was laying out there in the rain. I didn't know if his body was covered. They didn't tell me till 3 days later that he was covered in a tarp. Once all of that started occurring, and I said, we don't got a chance in hell. But then I also had hope. I had that hope and said, let the justice system do its job. Let the justice system give us justice. And that's what I hoped. My hopes were on, my prayers, and what happened, none of that happened. And I was just sickening, knowing that this injustice happens every day in those courtrooms. How many families, our ancestors, the 8 people they hung without a trial. And then to continue living this way through the justice system is really sick. They really think we want to put up with this kind of bullshit. No, it has to stop. We want justice. We want the freedom to go in that courtroom and have the hope that the person that murdered, that they pay their price. You know, they committed this sin. They went out there and they murdered, and then they belong in prison where they serve their time. And then when their time's up, they could say they did their time, and then maybe forgiven by community. And, you know, it's just, it's a long walk. That this, you know, it's just, like I said, I had hopes. I really thought the justice system, we had a chance. But then, now I know we didn't. And many families continue to have this injustice, and we totally need a change, you know, a change needs to come.
A lot of what we went through a lot of our experience, when Tasha approached initially, I remember her saying, like, I don't know what's going to come of this footage. I just feel it's important to record it, and that sticks with me, because for us as the family, sometimes it was a very narrow vision, like we were looking at exactly what was in front of us and dealing with things as they were coming. And sometimes we couldn't see everything happening around us. And I speak to even, for example, the bail hearing. The bail hearing, there were hundreds of people that came and stood outside the courthouse with signs and, with their drums, and were present, and like their physical presence was so strong and so powerful, and their visibility was just beautiful. But then you have snipers standing on top of rooftops aimed at the people who are gathered. You see the Stanleys being escorted in by the police, surrounded by police presence, as if they have to be protected, as if they're the ones that were in danger. Like, it was an instant criminalization of any Indigenous body that was present, and anyone who supported our family. It was, we were the problem, as Tasha mentioned as well, that we're the problem, and yet we're the ones who lost someone. It's our loved one who is not here today and can't speak or stand for himself, and yet we're seen as the threat. I remember sitting in the courtroom even, and it didn't stand out to me, because sometimes people have to point the things out, because like I said, we were dealing with stuff as it was coming at us, and there was a divide in that courtroom. So that's the thing, Tasha was able to record everything that was happening outside of that room, but in that room there is so much more that took place that is not in the film, and that we're able to speak to in opportunities like this, when we're accompanying films and being able to have discussion and shed more light. In that courtroom, there was a divide. There was our family on one side. They even had to tell us, like, this side is your family and this side is their family. There's a line here. There's signs even where reporters sit. Don't sit there. You sit over here and they'll sit over there. Like, there was a line drawn, and it was told to us to respect that line. And then at times the guards would come in and stand in between, as if there had to be more presence to show that line was there. And who did they face when they came and stood on that line? They faced us. They were watching us. They were intimidating to us. They were protecting the Stanleys and anyone else behind them. And that's what we felt every single day we had to go into the courtroom. And we didn't want to be there, we didn't want to sit there through that, because the courtroom does not acknowledge the victim's family. We sit there and we're not allowed to ask questions. We're not allowed to object, or, we were even told if we get too emotional, we would be asked to leave. So we had to control ourselves just to be able to sit and to be present. The other aspect was, they would not humanize Colten, not in that room, not in this entire process. He was not a person to these people. We worked so hard to humanize him, because he was loved. He was kind. He was funny. He was outgoing. He was thoughtful. He was such a good brother, such a good cousin, such a good person. And that was denied, because instead he was painted as a drunk, as a trespasser, as dangerous, as all these things that were brought forward and talked about. And we see this in the media as well. We saw it when we talked to the investigators. We felt it in the courtroom every time they talked about him in this light, but talked about Stanley as this hardworking farmer protecting his castle, his yard. Like, that was the narrative that was presented throughout the entire process. And when Tasha came forward and said, I want to record this, because it really is unbelievable. It's an unbelievable reality for Indigenous people. It's hard to be like, is it bad? Like, it's bad, but it's not that bad. It's like, no, it is bad. This is an unimaginable reality. I know those contradict one another, because you don't want to believe it's really this awful. You want to have hope. You want to have hope, and these are sometimes quite hopeless situations, but we continue to show up, to be present, to use the tools that we have, and continue to push back. We continue to resist. We continue to stand up. And I appreciate, once again, like I said, Tasha came and recorded, and she showcased as much as she possibly can to the story, but there are so many layers and complexities, especially in that courtroom. So I don't call it a justice system. I call it the Canadian legal system. It's a colonial system. It's not my system. It's a colonial system. It's Canada's. It's a legal system. So I include the police. I include the court process. I include all of that. That's all theirs. That is not ours. And so as we move forward, we have to be cognitive of that. And what's infuriating is that our people, our loved ones, should not have to die for us to have conversations like this, for change to happen. We should not be losing people for change to happen. We know it's awful. We know it's racist. We know it's set against us. And we continue to live in a society that pushes it along. And enough is enough. So
I just want to share a story, and it's true, you know, there were limitations of where we could have the camera and what we could show. And I tried to go as much as I could because I wanted to be a witness as well. And so I went to the preliminary hearing, which we don't talk about in the film very much at all. And but I remember I was just getting to know Debbie. You know, we'd been out to visit her a few times and you know, establishing that relationship. And when we went, I had an assistant with me, and we drove out to North Battleford, and we sat in the courtroom, and there was a break. And so we all left, and I saw Debbie go back in. So I thought I'll go back in too. So, you know, she's not alone. And I was just, you know, kind of sitting behind. And as I walked in and Debbie walked in, we looked, and there was the defense lawyer, Gerald Stanley, the prosecutor, and the judge standing together at the front of the courtroom, laughing together, like someone had just told a good story and they were laughing. And I'm just like, you know, I had several times throughout this film where I just was like, am I actually seeing this? And I am seeing this. And Debbie, this is how, you know, again, I'm getting to know Debbie. Debbie looks at them and goes, huh, well, I'm glad you guys are having a good time, because I sure aren't. And, you know, I'm sure not. And she went and sat down, and they all kind of turned red and, you know, went back to their spots. But I'm like, this is it. This is the legal system here, you know, and it's exclusionary. And, you know, but that was also my first moment where I was like, Debbie's not the person to back down. And I think a lot of people would have just sat down and would have been, you know, understandably crushed and worried and scared. And what does this mean? Like, where is my space in this process, right? But she said something, and you know, and I guess that in the film, their voices are the heart of this film, right? And this isn't to criticize those who've been quiet, because, you know, we've been taught forcefully for decades that we need to be quiet. And I never judge people who have a hard time speaking, right? There's reasons for it. You know, but I also know we need to value and support those who do have their voices and who can speak. And, you know, but I just wanted to share that story of you know, those things you can't have in the film, but there's a lot there that happened. And, you know, there's starting to be more books. And I just want to mention a book that Gina Starblanket and Dallas Hunt wrote recently that is about narrative. It is about the stories that were told in that courtroom by the players in that, and how it excludes and how it others and how it dehumanizes Indigenous people. And it's a really valuable book.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that. I'm conscious of time, and so I think maybe we should wrap up after this next question. But I do want to say, I mean, this panel, I think, is representative of how these issues have really solidified the solidarity that exists between our communities. It is plainer to see to me now today than it was at any other period in my life, how these are shared struggles that we are going through and how we are so much stronger when we are united together speaking in this way. And so I guess I would just ask all of you, you know, the show was just broadcast on APTN. I'm hoping lots of people have now had an opportunity to see this, to truly hear and see the truth and understand it. For you folks, what is next? What do you think is the next step that we need to take? And what can the viewers who may be activated by this film, who can sense the urgency and can see what's going on in the streets all across the world, what should they be doing as a next step as well? Where can we go? Why don't we start with you, Tasha?
Well, I think that, you know, there's many answers to that. I think as a filmmaker and as someone who tells stories, you know, it is about people needing to, on a large scale, unlearn and unlearn and unpack those myths that are so powerful, right? Our whole, everybody's culture has myths, and unfortunately Canada's myths about how they see themselves, about how they were formed, erase a lot of the truth and erase a lot of our history. And so it's, you know, I really, you know, and it's something I struggle with sometimes, is like, how, you know, where does the film go? What impact does what I do have, you know? And I question that sometimes, but you know, and I try to tell these stories, and especially this one, where it was like, I don't want to leave any space for somebody who watches the film to be able to pull away, that this is about, you know, our shared future. This is about, you know, you know, who are we really? And that can be painful for people to confront that. And I get that. And it's why I put my own family in, to be able to, you know, here's an example of an imperfect conversation, but one with love and one with that attempt. We're trying, right? We're trying to have these tough conversations. And that's definitely what I hope comes from this film. And I know, you know, it's going out into schools. We're seeing that's a tangible impact we're seeing. You know, we know the film has been requested in policymaker spaces, in certain police areas. You know, I think I've heard Eleanore speak of this, that sometimes the effort that is being done is really about harm reduction within the legal system, right? Like, we just want less harm to be happening. And, you know, I think that I'm heartened by all of the brilliant thinkers and doers that are out there that are really working to think about a different way of living in this space, living on this land. And in the meantime, I hope my film contributes to that lessening of harm, that you know, wherever it's seen, and maybe we won't see that for a generation, but you know, I do get hope from children. I do get hope from you know, I see my son. I struggled for a couple decades to find my voice. I'm really gratified that he's got it already and he uses it, and he's not alone. There are many more children who just know this is wrong. This is wrong. It's that simple. This is wrong. And it just like, okay, adults, let's catch up. Let's catch up and let's let go of these tightly gripped myths that we want to hold on to, and move into the truth and get down to work. And so, yeah, for me, that as a storyteller, that's where I come from.
Eleanor, what do you think is next?
I still would like to see a public inquiry or a royal commission into what happened in the Gerald Stanley acquittal. It could be a larger commission that looks at the systemic racism within the justice system. Tasha and Jade, they both spoke about events that happened in the courtroom, the setting of the courtroom. There's a lot of backstory here too. There's a lot of legalities that people aren't going to see in the film. And it all accumulates in this acquittal of Gerald Stanley. And that needs to be told in a more detailed way. There have been articles, books, panels, talks, seminars about the acquittal of Gerald Stanley and Colten Boushie's treatment and his family's mistreatment within the Canadian legal system. And that, of course, is impossible to include all in the film. So we would like to continue with the advocacy, but we would like to see public inquiry or a commission into what happened in this case and why was Gerald Stanley acquitted and how everything led up to that point.
Okay, thank you for that, Eleanor. Sandy, what should people do who've seen the movie, of what maybe watched this panel, have, I don't know, flipped by a news channel at any time in the last 6 months? What should they do next?
It's such an important question. I think that power really does a lot to make us believe that us as regular people don't have power. But we have to refuse that. We do. And that power is going to maybe look different for different people. You know, not everyone is going to be Debbie refusing to allow these people to be comfortable in their humor at such a disgusting situation. And she's going to call it, that's power. That is someone saying, I'm using my power to refuse to allow you to be comfortable. You know, not everybody's going to be Jade, who's going to be, you know, on television screens, sitting, talking to these media personalities who don't necessarily have an understanding of where we're coming from. But it is power. And we all have power in our own communities, in our own workplaces, in who we are as people. You know, people were shocked in the last few weeks when the players of the NBA and the WNBA decided, you know what, this is just too important not to do anything. And because of where we are right now, we're just going to refuse to play. And they used their power to try to negotiate for some changes, both where they were playing and also in broader society. We can do those things. Today, as we're recording this panel, scholars across Canada and the United States are engaged in a scholars strike to, you know, refuse to just go on with as normal. And some of them are doing teach-ins today that anybody can log into to learn about some of these issues. You know, we can be creative about the different ways that we can use our own power within our community. The real question we have to ask ourselves is, what are we waiting for, right? It's so bad. The urgency of this situation is unmatched. Don't wait. Like, really just take stock of where you have power. And maybe that power is around your dinner table. Maybe that power is in your congregation of whatever religious beliefs you hold. Maybe it's in your classroom and speaking up and saying, like, I don't agree with the way that we're moving forward with this mode of teaching. Whatever it is, we all have power in some way, and we must use it at this time. When else? Like, what is the threshold that needs to be passed for you to take some sort of action? That's what I think that people who are listening to this really need to ask themselves. For me, we've long gone and past that threshold. And I really think that we all just have to examine within our lives, where is my power, and inject ourselves accordingly.
Thank you so much for that. I want to give the last words to Colten's family. Jade, what should people do, and what would you like people to take away from both the film and this panel and everything that's been gone on in the last 4 years?
Thank you all. Thank you, Tasha, Eleanor, and Sandy for those words, and you know, it is powerful in what you're saying and the examples that you're giving, and it's an inspiration, and it gives me a lot in terms of being able to speak. Like, this is not easy. It's not easy even coming to this conversation. It's heavy, it's hard. This isn't a place where we want to be, or this isn't a topic I want to discuss, and yet I think about it every day. We think about it literally every day. And I always ask, you know, like, because I told this to my partner, like I as his sister and just as an individual, like I just I know I can't rest unless I know that I've done everything I possibly can, you know, and a lot of that came at a sacrifice from my own health and well-being, to a sacrifice with a lot of different things, professionally, personally, with friends and colleagues, and there's a lot but there's so much that is needed, and I hope that the sacrifices that we make, that there is benefit, that it will motivate someone else. And the talk about power, you know, like my kukum saw my power. My kukum, my grandmother, saw my power when it wasn't something that I saw within myself. And so having a voice is definitely a beautiful thing that every individual has, and I hope that what we do in telling our story gives and empowers other people's voices as well. And my family, like, we're always trying to think of ways to support other families. And we've worked with an amazing group of individuals from the Faculty of Native Studies and the University of Calgary. And we've created a resource also with the Canadian Native Friendship Centers. We've created a resource for families who've lost loved ones to violence, to help them to understand their rights, to understand the process, even tips for talking to media, because that's not something you foresee that you're going to go through in this entire thing, you know, like mental health resources. There's a lot of things that we didn't have, that we either had to advocate for ourselves or look for ourselves, and we see the gaps. We see the gaps when it comes especially to victim services. So we've been working with an amazing group, and we hope to publish that very soon to make that accessible to other families, so it helps them should they endure a loss such as ours. So that is one thing, so something to look out for. But just, Sandy, you said it so brilliantly, that everybody has power. We all have a place in society, and we have something that we can contribute at all times. We serve in different capacities. Some of us have more privilege than others. So how can we channel that and use that in a way that it makes a difference for today and for future generations, to be safe, to be respected, to be valued, and for justice to be present, to be a real thing. Because right now, justice is not a real thing when it comes to Indigenous people or anyone of color at this point. When it, you know, like white supremacy, it's real, you know? So how can we change that? And you can do that using this tool, this film. This film is a valuable tool. We tell our story so that people will learn from it, that we can all learn from it, and that things can be different. So following this date, this film is accessible to everyone, everywhere. There is no excuse to say you haven't seen nîpawistamâsowin, because it is available to you. And, you know, help us and get it into the hands and into the audiences of people who won't take that time, who are uncomfortable with conversations like this. We need to unsettle that, unpack that, and do something about that. And we need to encourage that. So, you know, like, moving forward, I hope this is in every single classroom. I hope that we instill a strength in people to understand the situation and to speak up. And if you're not sure what you want to take action, action is powerful, you know, so educate yourself. And the other thing I also encourage people to do is, in your area, if you see or hear of an injustice that takes place, go and bear witness. Go and bear witness in the courtrooms. Be present, because once again, those stories, those narratives are controlled a lot by the status quo. So go be witness, go listen. There are things that cannot be explained in words because it's more of a physical presence even. So go take up space and support those people who have lost someone, and then tell what you have seen. So that's a resistance that we can all do until change takes place. So thank you for the questions.
Thank you, Debbie.
Well, thank you, Sandy. It was a pleasure meeting you. Thank you, Jade, Eleanor, Tash, and you. But okay. I think everybody should see the film. They would learn a lot about history, about the 8 men that were hung without a trial, and how they were just washed away. I didn't even hear about them, you know. And I'm from Battleford, and that was not taught to us in school about what happened out there. And I just recently found out about them myself, and I was just like, okay, so this is where it's all coming from. They got away with it time after time, and it just continued going. So it's a norm. So it needs to change. So out of the film, you would get that the injustice that we continue to get. And our voices need to be heard. Our voices need to be louder. And the more we come together, the louder we can get. And the more of our youth, if they could go more into, we need more lawyers, judges, everybody to just get into that legal system. Then we could start making change in there. And our battle's not on a street, it's in that courtroom. And that's the only way it's going to get done, and it has to be peacefully. So we need all these lawyers, we need just people just to be on a jury, you know. Speak your voice, do what's right, speak the truth. And so with people to watch this film, I think they would learn a lot. And if anything, I always say at every platform we did, I'd always say, go home and hug that young one. Kiss them and love them. Because you never know when you won't see them again. So I'm just honored to be here today, and I'd really like it if everybody was to see the documentary right through Turtle Island, on down to New Zealand, Australia.
Well, thank you so much, Debbie. And for those that want to see the film, nîpawistamâsowin, We Will Stand Up, is available now in its full form on the websites of the National Film Board. It's on CBC Gem, their app, It's on APTN Lumi, if you have that service. And if you're one of our international viewers, you can find it right now on Amazon Prime and stream it there. Debbie, Tasha, Jade, Sandy, unfortunately Eleanor had to go fight another battle in Colonial Court, so she had to leave a little bit earlier. But I just want to thank you all so much for joining us here today. Thank you all so much for the work that you're doing. I'm honored to be part of this conversation, and it should not be lost on anyone watching this that it's women who are leading this advocacy, and that is incredibly important and should be acknowledged and honored. And again, I want to thank you all. I want to send all my love to Colten and the family and the community, and thank you all for being here, and thank you all for viewing. And please check out the ISO website and Facebook page for more of these sorts of panels. Miigwech, 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 chi miigwech, for all of you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse.